Thank you, Carolyn, and thank you, SCBWI, and thank you, TLA. I was a librarian, and I always tell the kids when I do school visits, I had the best job ever. I thought I had the best job ever, but I do have to say being able to write full-time is the best job. I can still go visit kids and do school visits and go to bookstores. And then I always show them a picture. I'm relaxing in my pajamas and staying home and writing. But I got started writing as a librarian. This says if you had a thesaurus, but I got started writing because I could not find, my kids couldn't understand the difference between a thesaurus and a dictionary. And that's one of the questions on the state test. And so I made, let me go this way, I made this book for them, and I put them in the book and myself in the book, and we talked about a thesaurus. And after I was done, normally I would do my lesson on the thesaurus, and then the kids would all say, what now what do we do when we did the activity, the follow-up activity? So I wrote this book, I read them the story, and then I handed out their activity, and everybody could do it. And it was like, oh my gosh, my light bulb moment. And I was so excited that, and so was the teacher, that she asked for my book, which I said no, I would help her make her own. And then she said, well, would you just make me one? And I said, no, but I'll help you make your own. And she said, well, why don't you just send it to a publishing company? And I did. And so like, usually when you send things to a publishing company, it's not fast. Here's another one I made for my students about the encyclopedia. We had this, and we had the same thing. As soon as we did that lesson, they understood it. I could give them each an encyclopedia. And before that, I mean, honestly, it was the whole time the kids saying, what do we do? What did she say? So I sent it to 2 different publishing houses, and I got an offer from both. So I chose to, I chose to go with Abdo. And then this is what came out of it. Here is my, and then they were really nice. So they did the illustrations, but they asked me, but they did it exactly like my book of the little kids asking, what did she say? And that kind of thing. Anyway, and she has, they had the kids talking in there. So they asked me if I would mail my books that I taught with to them. And I said, yes, but they're really big. And I don't think they had any idea how big. So I mailed them to them. And then they really followed along with the illustrations. So I appreciated that. So I got my ideas for the stories that I did from my students. I'll tell one more story. My 2nd graders were in the library doing, wanting to do their animal reports. And a little girl said she was going to do hers on fish. Could I help her find the fish books? And as we're walking back there, she said, well, I'm doing mine on whales. And I said to her, well, is a whale a fish? And she said, yeah, they live in the ocean like fish, and they have a tail like a fish, and they look just like a fish. And then I said, but a whale is not a fish. So I always start that with my, that's one of the things I put in my school lesson, because I love it when I can ask kids, so what is a whale? And those smart kids raise their hand and say, it's a mammal, it's a mammal. But anyway, that night, I'll come real close so you can see it. That night, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that needs to be a series. All these things that kids confuse. And then I used her sentence and mine about, what she said, they live in the ocean, and they swim like a fish. All of that, that was my first page. So that was my shout out to her. And then they asked me to do a whole series. When I said, hey, kids get really mixed up with these different things. And they study butterflies in school. So I got to do a series of those. My most recent book, I have 2 books that came out this year. So I have 3 COVID books. I have one that came out right when COVID started, and that was How Fire Ants Got Their Fire. I'm originally from Indiana, and there are only kind ants that might join your picnic. No fire ants. And my first encounter with fire ants was a bad one. And so I always wanted to do something about fire ants. We had just moved here. School started the next day. I was a librarian at my new school, and I'm planting flowers. And I dig in a humongous, that's the other thing. In Indiana, I have these little tiny fire ant hills. So I have no idea when I'm digging. I'm just thinking I'm digging into some really nice dirt. And these ants just swarm out and up my legs. And, you know, I'm on my hands and knees, and they're on my hands. And it was horrendous. And so, you know, I'm saying, ow, ow, and brushing them all off. And I go in and I hop in the shower, and now I've got a really bad headache, and I just go to bed. And then I wake up the next day. My hands were the worst. I mean, I had this giant forehead from all these bites, but my hands were like, and my feet. I couldn't put shoes on. I forgot that. I couldn't put shoes on. And, you know, like I kept my hands behind my back. I didn't want anybody to see. And I couldn't call in sick my very first day of school. And, you know, someone would go to shake my hand, and then I'd have to, and then they'd say, oh, you got in the fire ants. You've got to stay away from fire ants. And I said, now I know. But anyway, I wrote this story about this little girl who is the best cook in Texas. And the queen of the fire ants wants some of her chili. They're not fire ants yet. They're just plain ants. So this is my tall tale of how they got their fire. And so they kidnap her so that she'll cook their chili, and she makes it hotter and hotter, and they love it. And so while they are swimming in the chili, while they're swimming in the chili, she makes her escape. All right, so that came out last year in March. I had written this book, the book that Jake borrowed, because my students loved the library, but could not get the hang of taking care of their library books. And we all have these lessons on book care and your library lessons. And boy, I did all of them. And I realized there had not been a new book on book care since like for 17 years. So I thought, okay, I'm going to see what I can do. And then here's the cool thing about when you also get to illustrate your books. My son's name is Jake. So it says, this is Jake. And to me, this looks like my father when he was a kid. So my father passed away, so I always put him in my books. But this follows the rhyme, The House That Jack Built. So first Jake has his book and he drops jelly on it. And then his pet rat gets out of the cage and the rat licks the jelly. And then the cat finds the rat and catches it. And then the dog chases after the cat. So now I'll just show you this page because this is another favorite. Oh, so I have a standard poodle. So my dog got to be in the book. This is the dog chasing the cat. And now the dog's got the book. And I love this because kids you know, when I'm reading this, because I used my own book, a little self-promotion, and the kids will say, oh, he ate one of your books. And I say, I know it. Then at the end of the book, when he's so happy because the librarian's letting him have more books, he and his pets happen to be reading all of my books, which again, the kids will say, hey, that's another one of your books. So anyway, I just love it. I love to have stories where kids make connections. And then this year, Pelican came out with this book, and it's a flip book. So it's in English, and then it's been translated into Spanish. So I'm really happy with that. That just came out February. And then my other new one, We Really, Really Want a Dog. That also came out in February. And my editor said to me, do you think you can promote, can you handle 2 books coming out at the same time? And I'm like Carolyn and Lupe. I said, yeah, I can do it. But anyway, in the library, the kids love the dog section. And we would go back there and I'm helping them find a book, and they're looking for a book that looks like their dog. And I noticed that everyone, rarely is there mention about finding books or dogs at an animal shelter, or a partial sentence maybe, but then lots of information of, oh, if you go to this breeder and that kind of thing. And I thought, gosh, we need something to support animal shelters. So I have these 2 little kids that keep asking, and I've got it through the seasons so that it's a long time. They keep asking, can we have a dog? Can we have a dog? And finally their mother says yes. Now, here's my favorite thing about this. I combine, so my art is collage art, and my background is photographs. And so this is downtown Georgetown, where I live, is where they're heading to the shelter. And just another aside, so I make my photographs, and the photographer, I make my collages on a canvas, and then the photographer will come and take pictures. And then in the meantime, I will say to him, so where we live, there's a pool hall, a really pretty pool hall with all this scenery. So I will call him and say, hey, Robert, go take a picture of the pool hall. And then I put my own shelter in the building. And one day I called him, let me find this page. One day I called him and I said, hey, Robert, take a picture of your toilet and your dining room table and a trash can. And he never says, I know he's thinking, oh, good Lord, but he never says that. He just says, okay. And then he takes those pictures, and then in Photoshop, I put it all together. So anyway, and then my son helped on this one. He went with me and took pictures of all these dogs who are giving doggy adoption advice on the end pages. One more thing. I like to tell kids, because I would say that I always had a little student that would say, oh, I can't have a dog. And I'd say, you know what, there's plenty of things you can do to help shelters. So I put a craft in here that they could make a toy for their own dog, or they could make toys and donate to the shelter. All right.